Well, yesterday I had to loosen these 2 screws off, and also there's 2 right here holding this bracket to the forward body mount. So that is an adjustable part for your inner fender. So I had to take everything loose to be able to move this fender and get it to where I needed it. So what I got to looking at here just now, I went to tighten these back up from loosening them off yesterday. Those washers are too small. Those washers are almost the same size hole as what's in the fender. So it's just a large hole in the inner fender because it's an adjustment. Have all kinds of room. So right now I've got to take these out and try to find some bigger washers. I know I have some original washers, so I'm probably just going to clean them on the wire wheel and just spray paint them black and then put them back on there. I might actually, if these washers are made onto these screws, they are. So I'll just use these with that washer, but I'll put the big ones on there. It's just another one of them things where, when you're assembling the front clip on a car, you kind of need to know these cars a little bit and kind of pay attention to what you're doing. It's easy to, make a mistake here and there, and it's not like I'm the world's leading expert or anything, but I want Steve's car to be put together well, you know what I mean? I don't want it to creak and crack, when he's driving it, and that's exactly what it's going to do unless all this hardware is in here. I mean, it just creaks and cracks when everything's loose. Okay, so I got all the hardware in back here, so nothing's creaking now when you push on it. No metal moving around. I pretty much loosened all the hardware off on all the sheet metal stuff up here, and then re-snugged everything. It was just kind of a mess, but anyway, all this is tightened up and done. So all of the front of the car is pretty much done except the horns, and the wires are here. There's 2 bolts in here that actually the horns have to bolt to, so those need to be pulled out on both sides. Actually, looks like there's a nut broke off in there, so I'll have to put a nut on the back of that one. But the horns were in the trunk of the car, so they have a cover that pops off, and I've got a battery out here, and I've got my power probe out here, and you just want to ground the housing with the little ground strip on your power probe, and then touch that point of the power probe to the part where the wire hooks to, and then push that button forward, and it'll either honk at you or it'll give you a red mark. Both of these are giving me the red mark, so neither one of them's honking. So these are pretty much, if you're doing this at home, there is a contact on here just like points ignition. So if you can see it right here where I'm pointing the screwdriver. So if you stick a screwdriver underneath that board and just barely push down, see that coming apart right there? So I've got a piece of sandpaper here, and I stuck a screwdriver in there, opened it up, and slid that up in there pretty far, and then I left the screwdriver out, and then I pulled that sandpaper, and I did it 2 or 3 times, and all I did was clean the contact on there. So now it works. So now I have to do that one. So I'm going to get these working, and then I'm going to put them on the car. That way I know they were working before they got put on the car, and then when I try to get all the horn stuff in the column hooked up to work, if the horns aren't working, it's got to be something in the column, or the wiring itself. Alright, so these have been painted, but they're all chipped up, and it looks like they just painted over the top of crud. You can see a lot of trash in the paint right there. I mean, they're chipped up pretty bad. So what I'm going to do is I've got my little sandblaster set up out here. I'm going to go ahead and blast these because it won't take but just about, I don't know, 10 minutes probably, if that. And anyway, it'll blast them pretty clean, and then I'm going to paint them. I'm just going to use some black etching primer that's, just etch primer, aerosol black, and it'll have a satiny sheen to it, and it'll look pretty much stock. I think he had said that he has chrome covers for this, like aftermarket chrome covers. They have like a dome cover that fits on here that's painted black. So I'm just going to do this part here and go ahead and put them on the car, and then he can snap his chrome covers on there. But anyway, I'm noticing on this one, if you can see that oval hole right there is not really oval. It's got a messed up spot in it. So I've got my die grinder out here. I'm getting ready to round that out. It's supposed to be completely ovaled like that one, so it might make it a little bit difficult to try to get it bolted on and adjusted. So I'm gonna die grind that, and then I'm gonna blast them and then paint them. All right, man, with a long sleeve welding jacket on to blast in, that was really hot. So I got it all blasted. So what they had done is they just spray painted these over the rust. These steel brackets right here were all surface rusted, and they just painted right over it, so the paint would have just, you know, come off eventually. So I ended up blasting them pretty decent. So now the etching primer will have a good surface to bond to, and it'll be a nice clean finish. So if you're going to blast your horns, I don't like to blast the stuff that's all inside here, so I tape that off. I use 2-inch wide tape and just kind of mask it all off. And then on the inside of the horn itself, I take paper towel and just kind of wad it up and stuff it down in there, and that way you can kind of blast down in there. But I just don't like the idea of having media getting down inside the horn. I mean, it may not hurt anything, I don't know, I'm just not taking a chance. But these are ready to be, I've already blown them off, but now they need wiped down and then tacked off and then shot. And then after they dry, I can bolt them on the car and hook up the horns. So I got one of the screws I had a hard time getting out, which is right here. So I'm going to run a thread cleaner tap in the horns and a cleaner dye on these screws and clean them up. They just need to be, you know, cleaned up. And these will have to be cleaned too. So I'm going to get after that. All right, those are shot. They look pretty good. Beats the heck out of spray paint. All right, so I got a reproduction flipper off of Steve's 55 sitting here. This is the left side. And then I have a complete right side flipper for 55 because it's 3 spring. 55 had 3 springs, 56 and 57 had just front and rear springs. So getting this out and kind of messing with this doesn't have the spring in the front. It's supposed to have a double coil spring in this one. But when I push on this, see how that closes up like that? So when I get a hold of this one, that is smashed up against that felt strip as far as it's going to go, and that thing is halfway open. So there is no way that this is going to work properly. No way at all. Alright guys, so I took the spring, the front spring out. This is the reproduction spring, and it's kind of tweaked looking. So I took it out, and I had an original, I had a bunch of extras that I had taken out all my extra flippers when I restored my flippers, and I cleaned them all up and painted them. And that way when I put the flippers on the car, if I had a spring that was too weak, I had another one ready to put in to use. But when I put my flippers in, it all worked. I didn't have to change any springs or anything. So I had one over there on the table that was already clean and painted, so I put it in there. Now the flipper closes a little easier. Before it was just too stiff. So this worked for me on this reproduction flipper. I removed their spring and put in an original. I also removed the center spring, because before, when you close this stayed kicked out. So now when I've clamped these vice grips on there, it's trying to close without that center spring. So if you have reproduction 3 spring flippers, you need to, if you're having trouble with your back staying kicked out, take your spring out. All you got to do is bend one little tab right here, straighten it, and that thing will slide right out. And I mean, you can always put it right back in there if you need to. But what I did was I put 3 layers of tape on this, And I've got these set up kind of loose where they're not tight enough that they'll ding these, because if these are too tight and I crimp that on there, it dent that stainless. All I did was I'm trying to get that nylon pad smashed up against this to see what kind of angle I have. And you could see from the other video that I wasn't getting it to fold up that much with that original, you know, reproduction spring in there. Now I have an original spring in there, and now I'm getting it to close a little bit better. So this may end up working out, but now I need to put it on the car. But the problem is I've got to drill new holes. These holes, I need to drill new ones a little bit further out this way. So I'm going to drill some exactly where these are. Actually, I'm going to kick them over a little bit because that flipper needs to go forward a little bit. But I'm going to kick them over and out a little bit because they do have sideways adjustment this way where you can move the flipper in and out this way, but they don't go this way. So from where the flipper was placed on the car, it's too far in and it's too far back. There's way too big a space up here. So I'm going to drill new holes and place them where they need to be, where the car needs them to be. So I am more than likely, what the heck is up with that? I guess when it was being trailered over here and the wind got under there, it just pulled their felt stuff off there. These are going to have to be relined. That's not even a correct felt lining kit. All that was on the top. It didn't even have anything on the side. That ended up scratching that chrome up. Golly. Anyway, so I may end up having to loosen this track off and move this where, you know, forward or back. This rear track right here screwed into the roof, and it goes forward or backward. But I have to first get the flipper location and all this stuff pretty much dialed in first before I go to messing with all this, because I want a perfect line through here between both windows. So I've got a lot of work to do ahead of me here, but I'm just glad I'm actually gaining headway on these reproduction ones. All right guys, so this has been a royal pain, but I guarantee you I just figured out a pretty good solution to aftermarket flippers for these cars. So I ended up re-drilling new holes in the roof. I just did the very rear one and the very front one for now. I don't have any center screws in right now, because when you put all the screws in and you go and tighten all this down, it can cause this not to close at the back. So this will have to be shimmed to the body. So right now, just for trial fit, to make sure this thing is operating correctly, I drilled new holes to move that flipper more forward because it had too big of a gap up here, and also it was too far in. Even though that's adjustable, you know, this way, it needed to come out more. So I drilled them out more and more toward the windshield a little bit. So I just drilled the two. So after I get this lined up where it needs to be, I will go in and drill the holes in the center for the new ones for the center. So anyway, I ended up doing some more tweaking to that flipper, but I want to see if this works first. And it does. That flipper closes. How cool is that? So I'm pretty happy with that. There's supposed to be a little rubber seal that goes up in here, and I'm going to put butyl up here too, but I looked around in the car and I don't see those seals, so I'm going to have Steve order those. Anyway, that flipper is working up and down. So now, if I go in and re-drill these holes in the center and I tighten all that down and then I close the door and this back stays up, I know that this needs to be shimmed, and that's 99.9% of the time what's going to happen. Now, here's something that I did not show you. I'll actually show you on this other flipper. This is an original 3-spring flipper from a 55 right here. Those are reproduction flippers. So I took a pair of vice grips right here, and I didn't do this real tight. There is too much slack on a reproduction on this rolled flange right here. That is where the door slides on to the flipper, this part right here. So if this was apart, this door would slide on to this flipper. There was too much slack in that reproduction flipper, causing it to bind. So I opened the flipper up like that, laid it down like that, and I took a pair of vice grips and I just barely tweaked that about every 4 inches. Just barely tweaked it, squeezed it. Not super tight, just barely. And it took some of the slack out. Now, the other thing I did was they were kind of stiff. So I used some penetrating lubricant, like, you know, that's like PB Blaster, and I sprayed it down inside, that right there, and then I lifted it up this way and sprayed it down on this side, and then while that flipper was this way, it's open right here, so I just kind of sprayed it all through there, and I just kind of let it set, and then I started working that door back and forth for a little bit, and it got way smoother. So then I held it up on its end and leaned it up against the fence over there, and I let it set about 10 minutes to kind of drain out, and then I went back and wiped it off. So that reproduction flipper, I replaced the front dual coil spring, which was this one right here. This was the reproduction one, and you can see how tweaked out that is. I'm thinking these are too stiff over what the factory was. I don't know for sure. I removed this and I put in a factory one that I had in that reproduction flipper, and I bent this tab right here up on the center spring on that reproduction flipper. I bent that up, and then that spring come out, and I left it out. It's right here. So I basically made that reproduction 3-spring flipper into a reproduction 2-spring flipper, which is the way Chevrolet done it in 56 and 57. 55 had 3 springs, 56 and 7 had 2. Don't know why GM changed it. It's probably to help make this work easier. So now this flipper operates correctly. So that's pretty awesome. So these will work, but I did change the front spring, remove the center, and kind of tweak that door flap in there to get that, take out all the slack, because it was way too sloppy on there. So now I'll remove this flipper. I'm going to drill the holes, the new holes. Since flipper's on there, I've got a guide to go by. I'm going to remove the flipper, and I'm going to spray glue on that seal right there. That seal is wedge shaped. I have a playlist on rebuilding original flippers and adjustment and putting them on and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to check all that out. But I'm going to spray glue this seal on that flipper. That way that seal will be on there perfectly straight instead of being all wavy and warpy like it is right now. Because the holes, when those little bitty screws go in there, you got all that slack right there. And if you don't put anything on there to hold it, that seal will be wavy across there after it's assembled and look like crap. So I'm going to spray glue this one on these flippers. I'm going to go ahead and repolish these a little bit because they're looking a little worse for wear. But anyway, that flipper is going to work, and I am pretty amazed. They're actually working really nice. So reproduction flippers will work, but you do have to kind of tweak on them a little bit. So hopefully, if any of you have reproduction flippers, at least you got something you can try. Very first thing I'd try is remove that center spring. If you're having a binding issue where this rear is not wanting to go down, but it is working. I replaced the front spring with the original, took out the center. This rear one's still stock to the reproduction one. But that's pretty awesome, man. That flipper's working real nice. Wow, that was a lot of time in that. Alright guys, it's about 10 minutes after 5 p.m. so I'm starting to clean up my mess here and put tools back up. I'm getting ready to push Steve's car back in, which pushes a whole lot easier now that I've got the front end aligned on it. So anyway, I did remove the flipper back off the car because I need to go in and re-drill those holes in the center. I need to get the wedge-shaped seal spray glued to the top of the flipper. I'm going to polish it first though, but I am done for tonight. So that's all day long I've worked on the car, and I mean, doesn't really seem like I got a lot done, but you know, when you're putting the car together and you're real thorough and you're trying to make stuff work and operate correctly, it takes time. So, man, it is really hot out here. I feel like I've been swimming all day. You know how when you go out swimming all day or go to the river or the lake or whatever, you just get overheated and then you come back home and you're just zapped. I feel completely zapped of energy. So I need to put up shop, go in, take a shower, a cool shower, and then I gotta cook supper. So anyway, I will see you guys tomorrow. Thanks for watching.